presidency could impact the Israel-Hamas conflict, also the conflict with Israel and Hezbollah, is the CEO of Jewish News Syndicate, Alex Traiman. Alex, good morning to you. Always a pleasure having you join us here on Live Now from Fox. So, Alex, good morning again. We were just able to bring your feed in. So many moving parts. I would love to hear your thoughts. What are you hearing out in Israel? We are just days after the 2024 presidential election. We have now President-elect Donald Trump to know he will be the next commander-in-chief. And for many Americans, as they went to the polls, top of mind was conflict in the Middle East and how many people feel the Biden-Harris administration did or did not do a great job with the handling of it.
Well, on a percentage basis per capita, I can tell you that there's more people in Israel that are happy that Donald Trump became president of the United States than there is even in the United States itself. That's how popular Donald Trump is here, and that's how unpopular the Biden administration was here and how unpopular Kamala Harris was here because of the way that Israelis perceived the Biden administration was not throwing its full weight and support behind Israel in this conflict. They know that the Biden administration and the previous Obama administration were the authors of the Iran nuclear deal, which flooded the Iranians with cash that they've used in order to develop illicit nuclear weapons and also to fund terror proxies around the region. Prime Minister Netanyahu has stated that since the election that he's already spoken to President Trump 3 times, and he put out a statement saying that he and the president see eye to eye on the ongoing Iranian threat.
Alex, so glad you brought that up, because when we hear of different world conflicts, depending on who you ask, there is a respect for President-elect Trump. They view him as aggressive. They view him as not taking any slack for conflict, especially as it relates to allies of the U.S. We know with the recent visit of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not only did he meet with the Biden administration, but he made a special trip to speak with President-elect Trump, just further showing that respect factor that exists there between Israel and Trump.
Yes, and Prime Minister Netanyahu was trying to do his best to repair and restore the relationship with Donald Trump in case he would be president, and also to keep him apprised of what's going on during this war. And there is the belief that those that are calling for an immediate ceasefire in the conflict, you know, while that seems to have a lot of virtues to it, it would essentially be a guarantee that Hezbollah and Hamas would be able to rebuild and would likely lead to another round of conflict in the next 6 to 24 months. And I think that Netanyahu and Trump want to see this conflict come to a decisive Israeli victory that enables the Middle East to move on past the terror proxies of Iran and restart the broken Abraham Accords momentum that was here with the signing of additional agreements, hopefully also with the Saudis and others that would transform the Middle East for peace for decades to come.
I'm glad you mentioned Hezbollah, Alex. Right now, giving a live look out in Beirut, Lebanon. Those airstrikes are happening in real time. Israeli Defense Forces saying they are working to eradicate Hezbollah as that terroristic organization. But there was kind of some conflict this week. As we know, Israel's defense minister was saying Hezbollah was already defeated. Was there confusion on the end of Israel when you all heard that news as well?
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu actually fired his defense minister on election day due to some of the differences between him and his defense minister over the conflict. I think most Israelis would see, even just through the rocket attacks of this week, in which a rocket hit a kindergarten, in which another rocket struck a residential area in the city of Nahariya in the north, killing 2 people, that Hezbollah, while they have been significantly degraded, still represent a threat to the lives of Israelis. There are still 80,000 Israelis that were evacuated from their homes near the Lebanese border shortly after October 7th, and they don't feel safe going back home. So, you know, this is one of the reasons why Netanyahu chose to fire his defense minister, to get someone in charge of the military effort that sees the war the way, not only the way the prime minister does, but the way most Israelis do as well.
Alex, speaking of Netanyahu again, I wanted to actually put this shot up as we are now seeing that caravan of President-elect Trump has arrived at the airport there in West Palm for that departure to D.C. to meet with President Biden. I want to ask you about the conversations. I know you might not be in the room to hear exactly what Netanyahu and President-elect Trump speak about, but Trump is saying top of mind, he's trying to get those hostages home. He says it's been far too long. He says the negotiation with Hamas terrorists clearly isn't happening as it should. What are you hearing on your end as it relates to getting those hostages home and then possibly in exchange for those Palestinian prisoners?
Well, certainly, if much more leverage is thrown against Hamas and against the Palestinian people, then I think you can see the release of hostages. As long as Hamas thinks that they have a strategic advantage to hold the hostages and to continue to terrorize the Israeli public by keeping those hostages, they will continue to do it. If they understand that that they are going to bring a world of hurt on the Palestinian people over and above that which the IDF has already done, then you might see the release of the hostages, and hopefully the hostages will come home. They've been in captivity now for over 400 days. It's really time for them to be back home.
Yeah, it's hard to put that into perspective. And I know for many of the viewers this morning, their thoughts and prayers are with the families as they're pretty much holding on to hope. Even if their loved ones aren't alive, they just want to get those bodies back so they can pay their respects and hold a funeral. So thank you for mentioning that, Alex. Looking ahead, though, what does a post-war plan look like? I know there was a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to present that post-war plan, but then maybe we could see why that delay is happening, because so many times you go to the table, you try to have those negotiations out in Egypt, and then you're left with nothing. I also think it further shows, Alex, how you really can't negotiate with terrorists. I mean, at some point you're trying to get those hostages home, but can you really trust them? They're terrorists at the end of the day.
Well, I think you can't really determine what's going to be a post-war plan until you understand who is the victor in the war.
Yeah.
And the reason why Netanyahu has been coy in suggesting what his preferred post-war plan is because that post-war plan was at odds with what the Biden administration wanted. The Biden administration was very clear that they wanted the Palestinian Authority, which lost control of Gaza back in 2007, to take over once again, and for that takeover to be part of a pathway toward a Palestinian state, both in Gaza and the West Bank, the non-contiguous West Bank, which many Israelis know as Judea and Samaria. Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want to see the Palestinian Authority take over because they see the Palestinian Authority and Hamas as basically two sides of the same coin. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, are inciting and financing terrorists to attack Jews. I think that that's the reason why Netanyahu has been coy about it. I think that if Israel will win this war, which it is winning it, but if it will have a conclusive and decisive victory over Hamas, where everybody agrees that Hamas is no longer a political or a military force in the Strip, you might see then Israel, with the backing of the Trump administration, announce that it is taking over as a provisional military government in the Strip, as opposed to giving it over to the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, absolutely. And President-elect Trump has also said that consequences need to happen. He says he hasn't been too thrilled with NATO's handling of this international conflict in the Middle East. He also hasn't been too pleased with the International Criminal Court putting sanctions or trying to put sanctions against Israel and not Hamas in real time.
Yes, and I think that President Trump understands what type of leverage he can use against the United Nations, against the International Criminal Court, against the International Court of Justice, which is trying Israel for trumped-up charges of genocide, which have no basis in reality whatsoever. And Trump can make sure that these bodies are not funded and are lose their status as a result of unfairly targeting the state of Israel. So Israel is very happy for the newfound diplomatic support that it could get during a Trump presidency. At the same time, there are fears that in these next 2 months before President Trump actually takes office, that while the Biden administration is still in power, you could see Security Council resolutions against the state of Israel in the United Nations. You could see arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court against Netanyahu and other members of the defense establishment, and you might even see some kind of verdict against Israel for genocide at the International Court of Justice. So while Trump has been elected and Israelis are breathing a little bit easy, they know that these next 2 months could still have numerous diplomatic surprises that would negatively impact Israel's standing in the war effort.
So many great points you're making, Alex. And then there's also the concern from President-elect Trump. What happens when Hamas does release the hostages, if and when they do? Are they just allowed to roam free and potentially impact another area in a negative way?
Well, the preferred plan of Israel would be a grand ceasefire agreement that has the release of all the hostages and also allows free passage of the remaining Hamas leadership to leave the country and go into exile. And that was an offer that was put onto the table for Yahya Sinwar to take. It was believed that that was what was going to happen at the end of the war. Sinwar did not take it, and he met his fate inside the Gaza Strip. Sinwar's brother, Mohammed Sinwar, is one of the senior members of Hamas, and there still is some degree of senior leadership, and the hope is that that if they will release the hostages, if they even know where they are, if they can even deliver them, that Israel might allow free passage for them to leave the country and to go permanently into exile.
Alex Traiman, always a pleasure when I get to have you on the show and have these candid, thorough conversations, because so many times a lot of things are just speculation, what we see from the outside looking in. Always a pleasure to have someone who's there on the ground who can share in real time what's going on. I'm sure this won't be our last conversation, but I hope you have a great and safe rest of your day.
Jeane, thanks so much.
Thank you. Getting back to this shot that